Now that the Pharaoh Ant army has invaded Pandora, things will never be the same. It's hard to overstate how much trouble these super stingers are about to cause. They're relentless hunters, quick to breed, and, most worryingly, resistant to many pesticides. It won't be easy to stop them. In fact, there's only one thing worse than finding an established colony of these escape artists. But for now, there was no sign of any Pharaoh Ant queens. So I decided to focus on repairing the damage they'd already done. First order of business, set traps. I sprinkled poison along the ant tunnels, hoping to catch any returning scouts or stragglers. Next, I needed to muster a counterattack, except there was one problem. Most of the native species were still too small to defend themselves, let alone win a battle against the pharaohs. For example, the little black ants which used to thrive in the forest were nowhere to be seen. In fact, during my inspection, I found only a few small colonies, but there was hope. Hidden among the leaves, I spotted a big advantage we could exploit: the nomad ants. Although they couldn't protect themselves, they were a superfood for larger ants. So if we could boost their numbers, then maybe we could turn the tables. But to do that, I needed to know where the pharaohs were nesting. And to find it, I did something bold. I sent in the army of Cerberus. I carried out a sweep of the entire forest. The carabid beetles with their powerful jaws and flightless wings are the perfect soldiers. Armed with flashlights, we carefully searched every leaf and twig until suddenly, success. I found a suspicious hole in the driftwood. To confirm it was a Pharaoh ant colony, I poked a pin inside. Almost instantly, hundreds of the angry insects flooded out. I blocked the entrance with superglue and began crushing them with tweezers. One by one, the soldiers returned with more ants each time, making it clear that this was just a satellite colony. But it didn't matter because the more I destroyed, the stronger the others became. As I worked, I heard a terrifying crunch and turned to see a Cerberus beetle crushed in half. Apparently, being mindless meatheads wasn't all it was cracked up to be. It took only seconds for the ants to divide the corpse into bite-sized chunks and carry it away. And right before my eyes, a beetle flew out of the colony, probably the queen's mate. The situation was critical. If I didn't stop the breeding, then the forest was lost. While the Cerberus beetles cleared out the remaining ants at the satellite nest, I went in search of the main one. Hours later, I finally located the queen chamber. Sure enough, I saw multiple queens surrounded by eggs and larvae. Without hesitation, I plunged my pin inside. As the colony panicked, I pinned the entrance closed, but the struggle was far from over. Suddenly, an ant broke free and sprinted up my arm. I flicked it off and saw a strange glint on its head. Was it carrying a baby? Could they lay eggs on contact? Racing home, I showered and checked myself for bites. Relief washed over me when I saw just a painful sting. No signs of any eggs yet. Then I got to work strengthening the defenses. I created a moat around the entire forest, sealed the gaps in the roof, and reinforced the walls, effectively turning Pandora into a floating island. Next, I brought in reinforcements. Jumping into action, I grabbed a tube and prepared to relocate some leafcutter ants. But wait, there was a problem. I realized I hadn't properly sealed the container. The smell of the ants had leaked out, drawing unwanted attention. Yes, this was one of the many pitfalls of quarantine. But now I had no choice but to proceed with caution. I cracked open the tube and watched nervously. First came the explorers, followed closely by the foragers. After that, I began pouring in a layer of soil, burying the roots and hiding any traces of the ants. I repeated this until the entire container was hidden. This method isn't perfect, but it does help minimize the risk of surprise attacks. Just to be sure, I triple-checked the colony, then covered the opening with glass. Finally, I placed the tube deep within the foliage. All right, 1 down, 5 to go. A lot of people think of leafcutter ants as docile creatures that just chew up leaves, but they're actually extremely dangerous. Not only are they excellent builders and agriculturalists, but their bites pack a punch. And I knew just the place for them. The south side of the forest, filled with branches and leaves where they can build their massive leaf towers. As soon as I released them, they headed straight for a piece of lettuce I'd added to the forest, which I hoped would speed up their colonization process. There was only one downside. I had no way of knowing whether the pharaohs had managed to infiltrate the leafcutter colony, so I made sure to keep a close eye on them. Also, I had to make a tough decision. Would I add the Acrobat, also known as the bullet ants, or the Pandora, aka the giant bullet ants? Both are very aggressive, so I decided to split the difference and opted for the Dracula, or the strawberry shortcake ants. Not only are they super cute, but they're also fierce defenders. Each colony contains multiple queens, which helps ensure that there's always a backup if one dies. Since they prefer to nest in hollowed-out trees, I placed their container near the largest branch. Within minutes, the workers poured out, creating a line of ants marching toward their future home. Finally, I added the last of the new colonies, the Camponotus, or the carpenter ants. These guys are the OG team members. They were the first ants ever added to Pandora, but they mysteriously vanished years ago. Because they need a lot of space, I gave them the freedom of the entire forest. Right away, they began searching for a suitable nest site. Back at the main lab, I examined the bugs and frogs I'd collected to ensure they were pest-free. Fortunately, none showed any signs of infection, so after cleaning them up, I returned them to Pandora. This was part of my plan to rebuild the ecosystem and reintroduce some of its missing pieces. Sure, it would take time, but that's the whole point of a long-term project. With the forest restored and a diverse group of ants reintroduced, Pandora was finally on the path to recovery. But even though the ants were working together against a common enemy, there was still plenty of tension brewing beneath the surface. Even though they're technically not true leafcutters, the Dracula efficiently chopped up the lettuce. Each leaf was divvied up into tiny segments for transport, but this abundance of food attracted another hungry visitor, a giant centipede. She approached slowly, sniffing the air. Somehow, the ants didn't seem bothered, but her presence did remind me of another essential component: predators. Sure, the Carabidi were helping us fight the pharaohs, but I wanted more diversity. The forest had lost many of its original inhabitants, such as the orb spiders, which once spun webs between the plants. I missed their beautiful cocoons, so I brought them back. Soon, their silk glistened in the light, glinting like tiny jewels and adding to the vibrant tapestry of life in Pandora. Speaking of beauty, I couldn't help but notice the Acrobat setting up shop in a leaf pile. Their nests were surprisingly intricate, with bustling roads and chambers filled with larvae. It was a testament to their determination and complex social structure, but nothing compared to the sheer scale of the leafcutter ant colony. Everywhere I looked, I saw thousands of ants carrying fragments of leaves. Some were big enough to block their entire field of vision, but the ants kept moving forward. It was mind-boggling to watch. However, there was a dark side to this bounty. Huge piles of cut leaves accumulated on the forest floor, and although the ants intended to use them for farming, if left unchecked, they could choke the system. That's when I decided to intervene and remove some of the excess vegetation. I spread it out across the forest, ensuring the ants could easily collect it. But little did I know that this simple task would have unintended consequences. As I worked, I noticed the Acrobat Ants trimming the vines. This was normal behavior, but what caught my eye was their strange communication style. They kept touching their abdomens and making chirping sounds. I assumed they were tending aphids, but I was wrong. On closer inspection, I discovered the truth. The ants were grooming each other's stingers. That's when it hit me. The acrobats were protecting the smaller ants. It was a fascinating display of unity, but it wouldn't be necessary for long. The bullet ants were growing quickly, and in no time at all, they were strong enough to fend for themselves. Still, I couldn't help but wonder what was in store for the weaker species. As the sun set, I introduced the red swamp crayfish. They were a welcome addition, but also brought a sense of urgency to the project. That's because they needed lots of live food. So I started hand feeding them. It wasn't ideal, but it would keep them healthy until they could forage on their own. Back at the ants, the trapjaw ants had chosen a piece of wood for their nest. Their young colony was steadily growing, but they'd need to expand their territory soon. Fortunately, the rest of the native ants were also rebounding. I saw nomads on the move, black ants carrying crumbs and leafcutter ants harvesting fresh greens. As I stood there watching, I realized that the war had changed everything. Despite the challenges, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We may have started out small, but the forest was coming back to life, and I couldn't wait to see what the next chapter had in store. Thanks for coming along on this journey. See you next time.